Okay, awesome. I believe it's up. If it's not, Roger, please interrupt me and tell me that it is not up because I am under the current assumption. Okay, thumbs up. Thank you. You are my savior in this. So yeah, today I'm gonna go through, like I said, really informal. Feel free to interrupt. I know my org effectiveness team. I've only been with Best Buy for the last, call it 2-ish years. And as we all know, all experience, an incredible amount of change and disruption has gone in the last 2 years. So this is my little purview, if you will, of our evolution over that short amount of time. Being an OE is truly my passion. I've bounced around in different areas, like Roger said, change management, did merger and acquisitions, ran talent development for a while, but ultimately my heart lies in OE because you get such a broad range of what you can do and what you can influence. And so for me, that's really what's most important. So today, just going to kind of go through a self-introduction, a little bit about myself. I see a couple familiar faces on the call. So hi, good to see you. Apologies that you'll have to hear my intro again. And then really going to just kind of level set with the group. Like when I'm saying OE, when I'm saying org effectiveness, what am I referencing? What am I talking about? And what comes to mind for me as I talk about that capability within an organization. But I'm going to share, like I mentioned, a little bit of our evolution, which has been grand over the last 2 years and where I see us continue to head, as well as some roadblocks that we're experiencing as well. And then just going to share, observations from an OE practitioner, not sure if it'll be new for the group, but knowing we have a diverse amount of experience, expertise, et cetera, within this virtual room. Just want to share my lens on what's most needed for orgs and for OE and broad, MPA work, call it if you will, as we go into the future. So that is what I'm going to tackle today. Any questions or any other expectations the group has that they want me to hit on as I kind of go through that agenda? Okay, seeing head shakes. Again, questions, interrupt me. Keep the conversation flowing. My whole intent today is if someone else works with an OE team, if you are on an OE team, share your experience. Mine certainly isn't the one source of truth. It's a point of view. And then, like I said, if you have a question or comment, if you want to kind of pick my brain on something that I've put on a slide or that I've said, please just chime in and let's have some live dialogue around that. So a little bit about me, before we jump in, you'll see my 2 cutie patootie dogs I mentioned, but like Roger said, I am from a farm in South Dakota. So most of my family actually still resides there, farms. It was while I was at SDSU that I accidentally discovered that I wanted to be an IO psychologist. So I was set on being a clinical psychologist specializing in abnormal. Abnormal and working with children. 2 things that happened that course corrected me in that. One, started to get into the neuropsych and biological psych and realized I cannot study and live this for this number of years. This is not my sweet spot. The second kind of rule-breaking moment for me was I started working at the Boys and Girls Club and realized it is too emotionally exhausting for me to work with children every day, not a best fit for me. So kind of had that life-shattering moment there in undergrad and realized, hey, I actually really like business. I like communication. And from there pursued IO psychology, as Roger mentioned. So went to graduate school and got my master's in IO at Minnesota State. Did a few different jobs and a few different volunteer work while I was there, both for Center for Rural Policy and Development, clearly clear to my heart as of Farm America. And really help with some business strategies, some surveys, as well as working for our student-run consulting firm doing selection, development, etc. From there, moved to Walgreens, which then became Walgreens Boots Alliance. So a global entity that really focused not only on pharmaceutical distribution, but also at the Walgreens as we know it, right? The storefront, the retail. So really spent some time in change management there. Moved into mergers and acquisitions to help with the attempted acquisition of Rite Aid. Another fun experience where you work really hard on something for a year and a half, and then the deal didn't go through because it wasn't approved by the FDA. So then you scrap everything you've done and then redesign an entire global organization 3 times. So really got, my black belt in org design, if you will, while I was there doing that attempted deal that never indeed actually went through. So super interesting experience for, 2.5 years there. Certainly loved it. But like Roger said, miss being close to our families. My husband's family is here in Minnesota as well. Our friend base is here. So we decided to make the trek back closer to home. And so we moved back about, 4 years now. I'm admitting someone, I think that's okay. About 4 years ago, moved back, Super Value, ran change management for a year. They then got acquired by UNFI, helped with that acquisition, led talent at UNFI for a year, and then really missed that broader OE change type of space. And so made the move to Best Buy about 2 years ago. On the bottom, my husband Ryan there, my beautiful fur daughter, Pellegrino, our kitty. And then our two rescue boys, Kirby and Bowser, were Nintendo fans. So we named the boys after those types of characters. And then family and punk rock music are really important to both Ryan and I. So we have some pictures with his family, my family, our travels. We were fortunate enough to go to Greece this past year. And then on the right are a couple of our punk rock band and concert experiences. So nice to meet everyone. That's a little bit about me, both career, personal life. So yeah, we'll kick it into OE. So wanted to level set, like I said, when I opened up on what I'm really thinking holistically in my brain when I say organizational effectiveness. I know it can mean a myriad of things. And so I really like to anchor into this definition that actually came from some courseware out of the University of Illinois. And so really when we think about OE at its core, we're thinking about a system's performance, so a company's performance, a team's performance, however you want to apply the concept of OE to doing things right in the best way, and also doing the right things, making the right decisions for the business and for our people. So on the right, you can really see, I sit within the HR organization. These capabilities span across HR. These capabilities span across our business and finance teams, which makes OE sometimes really intangible or really difficult to lock down and make decisions on what should our team do, because you can influence and do so much to enable that system's performance, an individual's performance, or a team's performance. So when I think about this, I have my key partners, one of which I see on the line. Hi, Jacqueline. But, of course, can't do all of these things as one team unless we would build a bigger team. So one thing and one theme you'll see throughout our sharing of the Best Buy journey is that partners within this work are absolutely critical. And we could not achieve what we did without those cross-functional partnerships. So how have I seen OE show up in orgs? We've talked about, okay, great, these kind of capabilities can span HR, they can span finance in the business. What teams have I actually been on that are OE related, and how are they structured? So I've been in OE teams, of various names that sit within a strategy office. So really basing your org effectiveness off of that enterprise portfolio. I've also been in teams, and I'm currently in a team that sit within human resources, right? It makes a lot of sense. We're looking a lot of times at how we empower and enable people. And so it makes sense to sit within HR along with our closest partners, HR business partners, talent management, learning and development, et cetera. I've also seen, and even previously at Best Buy, OE capabilities be decentralized. So teams embedded within the functions they support. Is also another kind of common way I've seen the work come to life. Each function has its unique needs. Each leader has their unique point of view and leads on the effectiveness and efficiency of their team. And so for some orgs, it does make sense to have the capability decentralized. I've seen OE in all of its glory called several things. Org effectiveness is what I'm currently in. I've been on an org readiness team. I've seen organization development, people and change, people and culture, continuous improvement team. Certainly, if we think back to the prior slide and the different capabilities, it could pop in a learning team. It could pop within a talent team. It really depends the decision your org makes on what org effectiveness means and is defined as based on the enterprise need and kind of gap that you're filling. I've also seen it contain these different focus areas of work. Org design is a huge one. Talent development, learning and skills, engagement, change management, process improvement and Lean Six Sigma, portfolio and strategy planning, strategic workforce planning for employees over time. And then I've also been on teams where project management is included in these OE capabilities. Again, really varied across industries and across my experiences. I would like to pause. Oh yeah, I hear someone speaking up.
That's me. We read each other's mind.
Yeah. I would like to pause and just kind of hear from the group, like, has anyone been in an OE team, or have you worked with an OE team? And what does that look like structurally?
So I've heard a lot of conversations in the OE process improvement space lately around, wow, it just left my brain. Around, you'll have to give me 1 second. We'll let someone else ask the question and I'll remember its name. Design thinking. There it is. Two really basic words that you put together and then have some sort of meaning. Do you see any of that in the work that you've done, or have you heard anything about that in terms of Best Buy implementations?
Yeah, absolutely, Roger. Actually, one of the core, both design thinking as well as systems thinking is the term we kind of use. And so the way that it's popped is everything really that OE does at Best Buy is design thinking. You're viewing the enterprise as a system of gears, a map, a heat map on what needs to be improved, what gaps you have as an entire entity. But when we think about and talk about systems thinking, it becomes a skill for our OE team. And one of those things that in order to be on our team, you need to possess that systems thinking. And what we really mean is thinking about the ripple effects and implications of your decisions, thinking about how you not just form the puzzle piece, but how the puzzle piece fits into the entire thing. So absolutely, I would say you could call OE design thinking as well a design capability. Certainly we do have an org design component, but agree that is a hot topic, and I'll kind of hit on that a little bit later too. Other questions or thoughts or hot terms that you're hearing? I love a hot terms dictionary. Awesome. I'll keep trucking, but again, Roger, keep me honest, and anyone, please jump in and share your perspective or share your question. Okay, so next kind of piece, jumping into the Best Buy journey as I've seen it over my last 2 years. Again, disclaimer, I don't have visibility necessarily to what existed longer than 2 years ago, but what I can tell you is the transformation we've been over the last 2 years that I have seen is one heck of a change. And why I think it's so important to share the story, because I'm sure other functions, other teams are feeling similar transformative moves as well. So I'm going to call, the 2019, the pre-COVID. I think I was at Best Buy for like maybe 2 months prior to COVID. So take that with a grain of salt. But how OE really showed up at Best Buy pre-COVID is here on the left. So reporting into human resources as an OE team, but you can see the team focused on 4 capabilities there. Org design, change management, and I would say probably heavier in the change space than in the org design space. Talent management was within the team, as was a leadership development capability. So those 4 capabilities were all under one leader, with the team kind of deployed across the work. So on the right-hand side, the left shows really kind of the structure, the focus of the work. The right is where I really make call-outs that show the transformation and the changes that really occurred. So we had that one centralized OE team within HR, right, doing those core capabilities. But we also had a separate change and communication team embedded within supply chain, doing change management and communication work, but in a different way, the centralized team was doing the work. So essentially, you're giving your org 2 different change approaches. Plus, we also had, call it 5 to 10 that we were even aware of, change/project management/change operations, various title roles embedded within teams and functions. So we'd be meeting with a team to do a change discovery. It's like, oh, we have a change person who's internal, who, you know, necessarily sometimes hadn't been trained in change. So really interesting how the capability, though centralized, was also dispersed across the organization. Like I said, that org design and change was one pillar and allocated by function. So one dedicated to, you know, supply chain, one to HR, one to finance, and then really focused on, like I said, a little bit of probably smaller team org design, mostly change management for system implementation and various other changes that were going on. And then, like I mentioned, one of the key callouts, the change level of support and processes, because there was roles over here, a team over here, another team over here, were pretty inconsistent, all doing the best work and supporting employees and leaders, but again, not a consistent, cohesive approach to really teach our teams and leaders about change management, about org effectiveness, and move the company forward. And at that time, what I really saw as a key partner was our HR business partners. Certainly that still rings true today, but that was the partner that I saw that was most present. Questions on that before I kind of go into the COVID disruption of all that we knew? Okay.
I have a question. Sorry, Brittany.
Yeah. No, you're good, Roger.
Keeping you on your toes today here.
I love it. I'm literally standing, so literally on my toes.
I know over the past 3 or 4 years that there's been a pretty large corporate push for DEI initiatives from a more top-down perspective, and a lot of that coincided with pre and post-COVID, just because that's how things went. I'm wondering, and this might be a framing question that you might answer on the next slide as well, and answer in part here, if there were any changes from what that looked like pre-COVID relative to the approach that the organization took currently or is taking.
Yeah, so certainly we'll hit on this as we think about, you know, broader org effectiveness and broader org design as well, Roger. But we actually stood up, and Jacqueline, keep me honest so that I represent this appropriately. So call me out if I misrepresent. We established a function. So as talent management moved out of the OE pillar, it moved into a separate pillar that was talent acquisition, talent management, development, and I&D. So a dedicated function to that. That team is since going through, I would say, evolution. Currently within the org, the strategy remains the same to continue making bold commitments, to continue raising awareness and supporting our diverse communities as a company. But from my OE org design brain, you know, it was in this holistic talent and I&D function, and now it's really kind of carving out its own team. And what we discovered is that it actually really works closely with our communications team, is one of the big, I'll call it, synergies there. So while the approach hasn't changed, I can see the team potentially evolving over time, Roger. So really good org effectiveness question from an org design standpoint. And we helped kind of design and stand up that team as well. Jacqueline, does that square mean you're raising your hand? Or is it just because I clicked on you? Okay.
I'm not raising my hand, but okay, that was spot on. I did put that in the chat.
Okay, awesome.
You could start calling on people if you'd like, Brittany.
Put the pressure on. Well, I just did to poor Jacqueline. I must have just clicked your picture, so apologies there. Yeah, really good question, and feel free to keep them coming around the general org, and I'll answer what I can. I mean, I breathe day in and day out, looking at our enterprise and ensuring that our functions and our leader behaviors and our leader decisions are aligned to our strategy, both coming out of Investor Day, but as we look at our commitments to our people, as we look at commitments to inclusion, diversity, creating Best Buy as the best place to work, and one where everyone feels like they belong, is really important, certainly, to the work of the enterprise. So the COVID chaos for our team, I'll call it. So thinking back to the early times in COVID, like I said, we had dispersed teams doing change management and kind of system projects, implementations, pretty steady in our support. COVID hits and Best Buy had to flip its operating model on its head nearly overnight. We went to a curbside model. We had to shift the way we were looking at shipping items, managing our people hours, expectations of our people. And so I think about that from a change management standpoint and I freeze because I think of all the cross-functional implications that the company had to bring together across distribution, operations, human resources, the entire team, the entire company when I'm saying team in that instance. And so it certainly had implications for our business. So what does that mean for OE? At that time, like I said, we were focusing on change management and certain initiatives like systems. But when COVID hit, Best Buy quickly realized, hey, we're not necessarily set up the way we need to be to deliver on these new ways of working, deliver on the new customer expectations. So our executive team simultaneously said, hey, we think we need to organize ourselves better. How can we assess what's wrong and get after what we need to be doing right? So the entire OE team's focus shifted from doing various change projects to, hey, those are all stopped, quite frankly, because of COVID. We all pivoted towards org design and change. And so each of us were allocated to a leader. But you can see those two capabilities of talent and leadership development, as I mentioned from Roger's question, popped out, went to a different function, and our entire team focused only on org design and change. So sitting down with each executive leader and said, what do you need from talent investments? What do you need from system investments? And what functions or sub-functions in work are duplicative or not sitting in the right place within your org to end run our business? And so while it was a really wild time, it was really fun from an org design standpoint, right? You're getting an open world and transparency from the executive team to say, we really need to move these functions to align our people, set up career paths for success, and set up the company for success. So given we as an OE team had to support that process, we quickly realized we need to bring all our people together pretty quickly to get all hands on deck. So we centralized that supply chain team within HR and brought them into our broader team. We also then looked at the existing roles that were doing change management, maybe change management light, in their roles and said, hey, do we need to either one, upskill you and keep you in role, two, move you into our team, or three, where do you best sit for the work that you do so that it's consistent with the enterprise? And a lot of cases, it ended up being communications. So we've now created this centralized org effectiveness function, and we are all focused on the same thing, org design and org evolution for the company. We created incredible outcomes at that time because you were all focusing on the same thing, where you were able to more easily identify cross-functional ripple effects of the decisions we were making and got access to our executive teams to say, hey, here's what this leader's planning. What does that mean for your org? And really come up with a more seamless, integrated structure across the enterprise. I keep calling out key partners because they are so critical from the work. And so the evolution that I think you see here from the situation was before we were working, certainly with partners, but mostly with our HR business partners, mostly in that contained HR space. This COVID chaos, if you will, very quickly pushed us out of that comfort zone. And we relied heavily on, not just our HRBP partners, but our business executive teams, as well as our program project management teams to help us bring this work to life. So as far as the OE evolution, went from decentralized, focused on broader capabilities within that space, to a smaller, centralized team, only looking at mostly org design, and then the change management support of that. Question there. If not, I'll keep rolling into where we sit today. Cool. So how we show up today, and I'll continue to say, continued work in progress. The org is developing, our team is developing, right? We need to adjust as the company adjusts. And so today in our team, we're not just solely focused on org design and change. We've recognized the ease within the company, and a lot of these newer capabilities you see here outside of org design and change are with partners, taking partners very closely in the work. So today our broader OE team really focuses on org design and change, certainly still the backbone of our practice, but also looking at job code simplification across the enterprise to make easier job moves, development, career pathing. We also look at workforce planning. How does the workforce or headcount and team structure of today need to look different 3 years from now, 5 years from now, and make decisions based on that instead of in the moment decisions. We're also seeing an increasingly, and I'll hit on this at the end too within my observations, but an increasing need. Certainly we all know everyone came out of their heads down kind of COVID state and said, we need to develop our leaders. We need to develop our employees. Talent is more important than ever. We certainly feel that as well. And so we're crafting and offering in partnership with our learning teams on team effectiveness. How do we really stand up a high performing team, starting from the leader, the leadership team, and then rippling that all the way down. Another big focus, enterprise-wide, but certainly reflected within our org effectiveness practice as well, is data and measurement. How do we measure the impact or the outcome of what we're designing? How do we measure the success of our change management? There's the dogs, if you can hear them. Give me 1 sec. Oh, I can't mute. They say hello. They're very cute. Thank you, Ryan. And so, like I said, data and measurement and evidence-based practice are incredibly important, reflected here as well. And so we've been testing and piloting how we actually measure the success of our change management implementation and deployments within our teams. Are they actually adopting the change? Are we actually getting change buy-in where they see the value of the change, believe it's aligned with Best Buy priority, and they feel like they have the skills needed to succeed within their roles? That is a very growing capability, but something I personally, as an IO, am extremely excited about and helping drive within our team. On the right-hand side of the slide, again, those call outs on the evolution and the transformation, we're still functionally aligned, but now, I would say functions that make sense or work together. So my particular team supports our field employees, or kind of maybe the Best Buy as you know it. So anything supply chain and distribution, and then all of our retail locations and the operations that support our retail locations, as well as our in-home service agents, etc. We now put in place a practice where, great, we did good work. People are starting to know the org effectiveness team and want support galore, which is awesome. But, there's only so thin we can spread ourselves as a small but mighty team. And so now we do have an intake process where we look at the number of employees or leaders or teams impacted, the change expected to needed changes to day-to-day responsibilities, systems utilized, and that really informs how we support a team, whether we're dedicated, I'm in project team meetings, I'm leading meetings for the team, really, call it 100% in on that particular project. We also have an advisory option where, I might not be in every meeting, but I'm there for questions. I'm there providing activities, templates to help your team through a change. And then there's self-service. We have a self-service toolkit where if it's a smaller change or a leader-led change that we still think is important, we give them the tools and resources to be able to support and engage their something. The most noticeable difference probably in this big gray box I have here is the key partner list. So I would say as our practice evolves, as our practice expands and develops to do what the org needs us to do for it, our dependencies and our key partner list grows and grows and grows, right? We cannot do OE in a silo, in a vacuum. We are incredibly dependent on certainly our HR capabilities, but any capabilities that support initiatives for the enterprise. And certainly, it's not called out here, but more dependent than ever on our leaders to really bring us in early enough and really be making the right decisions for their business. Questions on our current state that I can answer, or thoughts on any of the rest of the org and how it's evolved within?
I have a quick question on that one as well, Brittany. Yeah. I hate to keep jumping in here, but I also don't want to leave empty space. So I'll give some people some room for thinking, which everyone's obviously doing, right? So one question I had is, what sort of pivoting did you see happening with technology and adoption and shifting right in the moment of that substantial change? And then subsequently, how do you see that changing moving forward? And do you, third part, I guess, what does that look like in terms of the discussion of returning back to the office space? Because we all know where your office is, right off 494.
Yes. I would say TBD on the office space. I mean, we used to Microsoft Teams, which is why I was so terrible at using Zoom. So I would say our business will continue to be virtually enabled in some capacity, right? Like not all of the leaders I support sit in Minneapolis. They're dispersed across the country. So that will certainly continue to be present as far as virtual work goes, certainly for us. When I think about tech specifically, I mean, certainly there's two lenses that come to mind. One, more important than ever for the customer. You know, I use myself as a customer case study all the time. I don't want to go into the store. I want to order something through the app, get it delivered to my door, go pick it up curbside, and have an easy, consistent process from seeing in stock on my phone, ordering, picking it up, all done, right, from my phone. So certainly as we think about customers and as we think about even Best Buy's move into the health business and the technology there, it continues to be present and a priority for our customers. When I think about the employee lens of technology and system, you know, our team is supporting, I'll say, less system implementation, but that doesn't mean it's not present. I would say data integrity and easy to use systems and technology is more important than ever, both for getting feedback from our employees, for managing our employee data, and just for general business process and automation. What can we automate so that the people and the brains and the minds that we have in the organization can focus on what's next, can focus on supporting that customer experience versus manual processes that we could enable through tech. So continues to be present in a big way, and certainly will continue to be present as we move forward. I mean, we're a tech company. Our mission is to enable lives through technology, and so we'll continue to do that. Jennifer, I saw your hand pop.
Yep. So, Brittany, this is really fascinating, and I know with the pandemic, there's so many things you could measure, but you know, that pre and post, what kind of metrics did you look at, and were there any surprises from the data that came out of the pre and post analysis as far as like what really worked and what didn't?
Yeah. Yes. So I'll share what I can. I mean, it's a very live process. So while I wish I could bring up the data, you know, and talk us through it, they're going through the change right now. So I'm unable to share specifics, but it's been a journey, really, because, you know, and what I'll share too is we have our change measurement practice. There's our engagement data, which we certainly lean on and tie to this data. We have a data and analytics COE who looks at things like turnover, churn, other, you know, PTO metrics that our employees are leveraging that we can get. And then we also have an employee enterprise research team who does a lot of roundtables, feedback, and solution deep dives. And so we have a governance process. And again, Jacqueline, keep me honest here, but a governance process that we go through to try and bring together these insights to get that before and after, what's working, what's not, holistically. So that is a really fun, I'll call it fun, growing process that we're live going through as cross-functional teams, like across 4 functions, honestly, right now. To narrow in on the change measurement piece, also a journey. So I would say it's like a pet project of me and one of the people on my team because we're measurement nerds. And so when we looked at the before and after, I think the complexity or what's challenging for me in the implementation is wanting to keep a statistically valid measure pure in its full factor, right? Use one factor over time. The reality is sometimes those surveys get too long for our employees to take in the field. And we don't want to pull our employees away from the customer to take a survey. So it's really finding that balance of what's practical to ask an employee versus what I would love to have from a data and analytics standpoint. So I will say, you know, one lesson learned for me personally is kind of take what you can get. If our leaders are there supporting, giving us data on these change measurement practices, get in there and ask the questions that they align to, push for what you think is right, but you know, it's not going to be perfect. And we're really growing through that. I will say one of the most fascinating things that we found that I can share is as part of our strategy, you know, we're testing different ways of working within our marketplaces. And it was about a year ago at this time, our executive team was having conversations on wanting to test out some changes in our marketplaces, in our field districts. And several executives, you know, Corey included, said, we can't do any more change. The enterprise is tired of change. They're change fatigued. We cannot test things in the market this year. And so we said, okay, like let's get under the covers on that. Like we agree, it's been a tiring year. Like no one will argue with that concept, right? Especially for those in our stores. But let's poke at that a little bit. And so what my team and I did was actually find a measure, a valid measure of change fatigue, and then change uncertainty or psychological uncertainty. And what we found when we sent that to even a test section or a smaller pop size was that it was the uncertainty, not fatigue of change. And so we actually found that employees were like, yeah, it's been a tiring year, but I'm more worried about knowing something has to change based on what I've seen change in our business over the last year and not know what that is. So can we actually just do the change? And providing that data to our executive team last summer actually completely changed the plan that they had for what we put in place. And so that was a really cool measurement moment for us to say, hey, even though maybe we're not getting it perfect, we are capturing the voice of our employee and we influenced a really big decision for our business. And we're also seeing, you know, in our before and afters through the rollout of that exact same process and test, overall positive change adoption. We definitely could work on communication, I'll say, for your lessons learned kind of component there, Jennifer, but overall, I'm taking it as a win that we have ways to measure the success of what I'm doing and how we can best support those who are experiencing change.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, any other follow-up questions or things you want me to hit on measurement before I go to Bill?
Nope.
Cool. Bill, I saw your hand.
Yeah, I'm looking at your org chart here, which is very hierarchical. But what you're describing sounds very much like a matrixed organization. And I'm wondering if how you work amongst yourselves and with other departments has had an impact on how other parts of Best Buy interact with each other.
Yeah, I love that question, Bill, and I'll actually hit on that as a sec of one of my core learnings and observations, right? So this looks hierarchical. Our team is actually, this isn't like an org structure. We all do kind of all of these roles across like our reporting function. I think we have a couple senior directors, couple directors, and then a layer below that. But agree, like when you look and think of the team, we are functionally aligned, but every decision I make impacts other areas that OE supports, right? Omni ops, certainly influenced by merch back and forth. And so the nature of our role as we got elevated through that COVID chaos bump to do that cross-functional enterprise design has leveled up the need to be cross-functional from our team and certainly from other teams as well. And so I would say we are working our way through it. It's not that we haven't been cross-functional before, but the level of dependency on each decision is greater impact than I think it was before. So one, it's both a blessing, like we're able to influence, and certainly it's our role as OE to influence the behavior of the organization to be doing the right things and doing them the right way. One of those ways is to work and decision make cross-functionally. The other thing is it is challenging for teams who are not thinking with that enterprise lens. They may be really, really focused on a deep project and not able to raise their heads up to look cross-functionally. So I'll say, Bill, like one, yes, the need to work in a matrix organization and work in a matrix way within our OE team, incredibly high. And we're working to do that and continue to try to improve every day. It's also, I would say, brought a little bit of a flashlight moment to areas of our business where maybe we aren't thinking cross-functionally in our decision-making, and we need to get a lot better at that and create processes that can enable us to do that. So great call out. Yeah, it's been one of the biggest blessings to have that visibility, but also very difficult to execute cross-functionally when you have a small team. And also not all other teams that support cross-functionally work in that same way. Yeah, as follow-ups from that or anything I said trigger any thoughts, Bill?
Nope, just curious.
Cool. Yeah, no,
It's sometimes how we work has unintended consequences in terms of what we wind up doing.
yeah, oh, 100%. My role is 100% different than it even was, working, I supported certain functions, helped restructure our category management team. And now I was just telling my boss the other day, I just am floating among all these things to identify like, hey, did you ask this person about that decision you're making? Because if not, like that is not going to go well. So yeah, certainly I feel it. And I would say we continue to push that for our org and for our leaders to think that way as well.
Cool. Good. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Anything else on the work here or anything I mentioned from the group? Cool. Yeah, so fielding our future. You perfect lead in here, Bill. Thank you for that. But fielding our future, what does it look like? We've disrupted our practice over the last 2 years. The enterprise is growing and changing how they operate as well. What's on my mind as I think about what the future of our OE practice looks like and the work that my team does every day? So change is certainly a word that's consistently on the tips of tongues, the front of minds. Everybody's talking about change. We need to be better at change. Change is continuous. Change is moving faster than it ever has, yet the slowest it ever will, whatever that means. And so we hear it all day, every day. We need you, we need you, we need you. Sometimes when we say we need change support, we have to get under the covers a little bit. Yeah, sometimes you may need change support. Other times you probably need talent management support. You need a development plan to talk about your team's development. You may need engagement type activities or work within your team. A lot of the time, quite frankly, it's upskilling that people want. So they'll say, we need change management support. And then, I always have a little tiny moment of guilt where I'm like, well, I've got to direct you to our learning team because what you actually want is training and upskilling for your team. So the interesting part about, Bill, your call it not only to work cross-functionally, but we're honestly sometimes like a little redirect train station too, where we'll get pulled in on something. It's not even our role. So we'll have to redirect to the HRBP, our learning team, a data team, someone else who owns that. So I think that's a really interesting role to play where I have this moment of guilt of like, oh, you asked me for help, I should be helping, but I'm not the right person. So let me connect you. So really digging into that. Also super present for us in our practice right now is change management as a practice. So the tools, your methodology, your deployment of communication, training to prepare for a specific change you're deploying versus change skill sets and mindsets. Everyone right now is wanting both. Hey, I need change management support for a change that I'm doing within my team. And I want you to upskill my entire team on how to do change management, how to have a more agile mindset. So it's this really interesting balance. Every meeting we go into, every effort we take on, be really aware of bringing in the right partners, but also making sure we're delivering on, hey, that is the right thing for the enterprise. So how can we teach them to fish while we're fishing with them, if you will, or going through this change process and supporting them. And then one of the third pieces that we hit on with that measurement component, but is it change fatigue or change uncertainty? Certainly we're all tired, but I think we keep hearing the language of change. Things need to change. Things are changing. Are people feeling tired from that? Or is it like, oh, everyone's saying we need to change, but I don't know what action I can take. I don't know what's in it for me, and I don't know what to expect. And that is what's weighing on me. And honestly, like, yeah, there is change fatigue present. We're all probably feeling it personally at work, etc. But a lot of it is the uncertainty. We're hearing change constantly, but what it means, what it translates to, isn't always clear. And that's what causes the stir. The other call out, which Bill perfectly teed up, is it's increasingly cross-functional, not only on our dependencies on partners, but on every advisory decision I give to a leader, there's probably 4 ripple effects and other functions that I need to take to my OE team, make them aware of so that they can then support their leader in knowing about that change and being engaged in that decision-making process. So, it's both. The first bullet is exactly what you asked, Bill. How do we manage our intended cross-functional outcomes and the way we need to do work when other teams don't operate the same way we do? It makes for sometimes a very interesting experience as you work both vertically, really deep, and horizontally across teams. It's also knowing, being moving in the moment, implementing solutions when you have to communicate and know, hey, this isn't the final solution. Things are iterative. We're testing. So I need to implement something in the near term when I can't always give you a picture like I used to be of what that long-term picture we're building is. We maybe have a 5-year, but we don't have a clear 2-year, and we've got to work together within that and roll it out despite some uncertainty. And then the third is, again, something that I teed up, but how do we, knowing it's a huge need, knowing the org needs us to continue evolving and supporting change, how do I manage capacity for my team? Continuously aware of keeping capacity under 100% as much as I can. So there's room to breathe, there's room to create, there's room for their lives, right? Like we all love work within our team, but I'm like, okay, we need to stop, take a mental break. So how do I manage that capacity knowing the org need is so strong? And then there just continues to be the question, as we bumped from, I'll call it like deep level projects pre-COVID, went all the way to our executive level in COVID. Now it's like, where do we find the balance of where we support in between? At what level, how deep do I go into an org when doing a change implementation? And how do you say no to someone who says, hey, I need your help, my team's struggling, and my team doesn't have capacity to support that? No, I would say that is very difficult for me, knowing that the org needs us. And so to your point, Bill, increasingly cross-functional, increasingly putting a spotlight on us to say, who do we want to be as OE and how do we show up in the enterprise?
I kind of have this image of your organization being kind of like an octopus or a spider, with legs out all over the organization. But it strikes me that puts you in a really unique position to provide important channels of communication between different parts of the organization.
Yeah, yes. I would say it does. I love the octopus. I'm going to take that to my team tomorrow. Send them a little picture. That is how it feels, honestly, and it does put us in a really good position to create more impactful experiences to the best of our ability, right? Like things are still running. It's not like I can say pause because I need to bring in this change. It's about balancing how do you connect everything from a communication standpoint, from what's happening all at once across the enterprise while still making progress. You don't want to pause something because you might need to manage an implication or a ripple effect over here. So agree, increasingly unique position, which then puts the ownership on us to say, we have to increasingly improve the way we operate and we need to bring our partners along with us. And like I said, like I'm more dependent on my partners now more than ever for the work that I do, which is, I would say, an evolution of the practice as well.
So it sounds like you've become kind of a meta organization within the organization. Yeah.
Yeah, it kind of feels like that. I do joke like we're a little mini consulting firm, because we kind of pop around. So yeah, I like that. And okay. Any other questions here? I'll keep the group posted on where the team goes, certainly as we continue to evolve for sure. So just to kind of wrap up before I open to broad questions, anything about me, anything about the experience, or, Jacqueline, I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you want to share anything about, hey, working with Britt is great, or hey, working with Britt is really difficult, throw that out there as well too. But just observations on what I see from that lens of being the octopus, of what's incredibly important to our organizations over time. Data is just such a hot, what I call it, Roger, a hot topic, hot dictionary topic. But certainly it really is, not only within data and integrity, ease of system use as we access that different data, both for our customers and employees, but data and decision-making, evidence-based solutioning and designing, incredibly important, not only for those making the decisions and designing things within the org, my team is included, but for those who are giving the information. In the last year, we've rolled out a new role within our team called a change leader, which sounds like, well, why is that new? You do change. True, but we labeled the position a change leader because we actually had leadership from our field structure team come into our org who are side by side with our territory officers and visiting our stores, saying to our employees, hey, what about the changes in roles or ways of working this month is working for you? What do you hate? What do you like? And having that new change leader role with that perspective of coming from the store, coming from that team, it's incredibly important for our employees and our leaders to feel heard. And that role is really helping us. Data-based decision-making is a needed skill. We've always used data, certainly in our decision-making. Finance and metrics certainly play a large part. But what I mean by a needed skill is that decisions need to be made a little differently. So you might not have all the pieces of data you need to make a decision, and you need to work iteratively. So that's an observation I'm having as well. Hit this a little bit earlier, but talent and development and engagement are more important than ever. The experience that we create for our leaders, our employees, incredibly important, always has been. There's a spotlight on it, I feel like more now than ever, that we need people to operate a little bit differently. We're also hearing and seeing in the org design and the change work that we support, our talent wants to keep growing. They want to move across. They want to do a stretch assignment. They want to shadow someone else's work. They want to get promoted. How can everyone get promoted? People are wanting to move and learn and grow more than ever, which is really cool. But it puts, kind of ownership on us to make sure we have the processes in place for them to be able to do that. And then, like I said, a little bit, needed leadership skill sets continue to be human-centered, putting the employee experience first, thinking about it as a whole human, not just a human at work, I think is incredibly important. And then structures, which we talked about a little bit with that cross-functional discussion, but working well for our leaders and teams within their vertical team is just as important as working across. I know we've heard break down the silos a lot. Certainly that is present, and those cross-functional ripple effects are incredibly important, but you need to also have a well-oiled machine within your vertical and within your function to be really successful and make meaningful impact across the enterprise. And then, as an OEM change practitioner, I'm continuously pushing the skill set around, are the right stakeholders engaged? If you make that decision, what are the 4 down the road ripple effects that we can anticipate? Based on those ripple effects, now who do you need to go talk to that you haven't talked to before? And just continuing to push our leaders and teams in that thought leadership space of anything I do has a ripple effect. How do I help those who are feeling the ripple get through it a little bit easier? So I continue to push that, certainly. And with that, yeah, Jacqueline, I would maybe open it up if you're comfortable. If not, tell me, Britt, but would love to hear from your experience. You work with our team. You're one of my trusted partners that I'm dependent on, and you're in this data journey with me. So I would just love your perspective on how you've seen our team move or work with you as well. Sorry for putting you on the spot, but.
No, all good. Yeah, so I represent another octopus arm that works closely with the OE team. I come from talent management, but am now moving to the employee experience team, actually a new arm sprouting. And I mean, honestly, it's been great working with Brittany and the entire team. So my main function is employee engagement, and you can see in how many times that showed up in Brittany's presentation that she's a strong partner for me. Big advocate for the engagement space. And I've worked with a number of the team members who also lean in and integrate where we need that integration. whether it's in getting programs off the ground, learning what's needed for that engagement and driving it and helping to drive it across teams. Yeah, that's what I got.
Awesome. Thank you. You rock. Yeah, we're on the journey together. I love it. A co-arm of the octopus. Awesome. Any other questions or comments from the group on either the role of OE or any of my past experiences I can share?
Yeah, Brittany, for the students or the folks that are young in their career who are listening to this tonight and saying, this sounds kind of interesting, I'd like a little piece of this.
Yeah.
What kind of advice would you give them in terms of classroom preparation and experience, and who should they be talking to help them learn how to move in that direction?
Yeah, absolutely. Great call out, Bill. Yeah, certainly one, reach out to me if you're interested to learn more. I think Roger shared my LinkedIn, so I can definitely be a resource for anyone. I would say as far as preparing in the classroom, I lean on my skills, just to analyze everything a lot, not even necessarily needing a data and analytics or stats background, but just taking that mindset of learning. Like that is what I do every day, all day. I learn things from my leaders and teams, I analyze it, and then I go back and ask a question, and then I learn something else. So I think, keeping that skill set and that interest of learning is so important, as well as that analytical mindset. I think as far as courseware, really varied. I really like and you kind of saw it on one of my slides where I defined OE, and I can share it out, Roger, if I can find the link, but there's an iMBA program from the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, on Coursera. You can audit it for free. I believe the course that I took that definition from was either called org development or org effectiveness, that I actually had my team take. They didn't have backgrounds in OE. So my team actually came out of an operations function, came out of merchandising, and came out of project management. So I would say follow your heart on what your career tells you. If you're interested in a path similar to mine, I recommend starting in change management because you get exposed to not only so many HR or OE capabilities, but also to the businesses you support. And I think it gives you like a really nice field to explore different areas without dedicating to them. So certainly I think that's the best practice for how I got where I am. But I would just say continuous learning. Feel free to reach out for me. But yeah, I really appreciate that iMBA courseware that you can audit for free through University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. And I can find the exact course, but they have like a management kind of courses and one on org development and org effectiveness. Yeah, and then I'm happy to help provide coaching in any way too. So certainly ping me for anything. Anything else from the group?
No, it looks like people are starting to dwindle out here, but we've dropped from 29 down to 17.
It's 7 o'clock Central. If you haven't eaten yet, you gotta eat.
It's true.
Awesome. Well, I'm seeing a couple of thank yous. Like you said, Roger, I think seeing people drop. Again, encourage you to reach out with questions or insights. Thanks for asking questions to those who did. Thanks for letting me put you on the spot, Jacqueline. Appreciate you. And yeah, thanks for having me, Roger.
Yeah, and thanks for jumping on here, Brittany. And I appreciate all the back and forth. And yeah, it's great to see you.
Awesome. Good to see you all too. Talk soon, I'm sure.
Yep. Happy Empire, everybody. We'll see you all next month.
Yeah, octopus.
Thank you, Brittany.
Yeah, you're welcome.